You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means we are back. It is Monday. Time for the final crypto rundown for the insane year that has been 2025. When we come back together next week, listeners, it's going to be a wild new year. So it's going to be a wild one. Strap in. Should be fun. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as on the network upon which all of you folks are binging. If you're one of our newer listeners, you haven't yet checked out the full network, what are you doing? Make sure you check out the full network wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Could be Spotify, could be iTunes, wherever you go to get your podcast. We don't judge. And then, of course, if you want to go big or go home, and you're already home and you want to go big, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Couple days left in the year to get your name in the hat for the December Pro Trading Crate. Also, get ready to join us for the upcoming Vol Deathmatch 2.0. Should be a banger. theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn all about that as we learn who's joining us for the final crypto rundown of 2025. Our good buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini from Amberdata, the man with all the data. We're going to crunch a lot of it today. Mr. Greg, I hope you are rested and raring to go. Going to be a banger today. Are you ready, sir?
I am ready. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, everyone. We've had quite the markets, especially in precious metals, more interesting than crypto right now. But
and we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to talk about crypto as we kick off.
We're going to talk about crypto.
Talk about the final, as we kick off, I should say, the final Bitcoin breakdown of 2025.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the final Bitcoin breakdown of 2025. As we're coming into this segment, listeners, we're seeing Bitcoin taking a bit of a break. A little bit shy of 87,500, 87,439 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down almost exactly 1,000 points. 993 to be precise, from where we were this time a week ago at 88,432. But you know what, Greg? It is the final Bitcoin breakdown of 2025. So I thought we'd spend some time gazing back at the mad, insane year that was 2025 from a Bitcoin perspective. We'll get to ETH and a bunch of other crypto assets a little bit later in the show. I could kick things off, Mr. Greg, or if you want to just dive right in, when I ask you what really stands out to you, what resonates to you in the world of Bitcoin in the mad year that was 2025, what would you say, sir?
Yeah, I think the big story in Bitcoin specifically is the amount of open interest in the IBIT options, the amount of adoption that the ETF has gotten. We've really seen, although we haven't seen a break away from the quote unquote 4-year cycle, we've seen a different investor base in Bitcoin than we've seen in the past. There's this thread going around in crypto Twitter about, Bitcoin had its IPO moment. So the spot ETF is like the IPO moment for Bitcoin. It is finally the time for big time whales who've owned Bitcoin for a decade to get liquidity and potentially distribute their shares like you would see in a typical IPO for a corporate listing. So I think that's kind of the big narrative. In terms of price, something that's pretty interesting is, we've had lows that were marked by the Liberation Day tariff scare, which sent VIX, around 60, some crazy number like that. And we sent Bitcoin like to test below the 80K level. And then we had just a nice recovery rally. And then ever since, September-ish, Bitcoin has diverged away from tech stocks, away from precious metals, and it's been moving on its own despite all the regulatory tailwinds. Everything in the regulatory landscape has been, pretty supportive in terms of the Genius Act. We've had pardons given to CZ and Ross Ulbricht and everyone who was considered maybe a target by U.S. government has been essentially, freed from that worry. So now, what's the driving force behind Bitcoin? Given that, as far as headlines go, all those things are well priced or came in good, so to speak. So I think those are the big themes. And then on the vol surface front, I think we've seen a shift in the vol surface composition. So Bitcoin went from maybe a gold-like vol surface in the sense that the call side was often more expensive than the put side in terms of risk reversals. And then today we're seeing the inverse, where calls are sold down, puts are bid up. And I think that's really reflecting the new investor base in the Bitcoin spot ETF. And we know that the flows of vol trading are now equivalent between IBIT and Darebit. So the battle of who's the vol trader for Bitcoin is being defined by offshore traders, around the world. And now they're losing ground to the traditional U.S. traditional investors and investor base. So I think that's why we're seeing it act more as a risk asset.
Yeah, I think that the IBIT story is definitely the story of 2025 and indeed 2024. We'll get more of that in a second here, listeners. Let's break down some of the key levels Greg just touched on for the year. Like I said, we're down slightly on the week. And as you look at it on the year, we are down on the year as well, as this recent downturn has taken us red for the year again. As we kicked off the show, we were down almost 6,000 handles year to date. Puts us down a little over 6, about almost 6.5% on the year. We started the year in the mid 90s, somewhere in that ballpark, listeners. Obviously, it depends on the venue you're looking at and all the exact time, but somewhere in that 93.4, 93.500 range is where we kicked off the year. All-time high coming on that October 5th to 6th range, right around the 126,000 level. So looking pretty good from that end. Of course, as Greg mentioned, there were a few dust-ups in between, including back on April 8th during the tariff tantrum madness when everything got sucked down, including Bitcoin, broke the 80K level, got down to somewhere in that 76,000 ballpark, right around 76,200 is what's deemed by most places to be the low on the year, but somewhere in that 76,000 ballpark range before turning right around again and rallying back to new all-time highs in that October timeframe. So wild stuff out there. I'll get to some of the vol landscape in a little bit, but I want to look at what Greg was just talking about on the year as well, which is kind of inescapable. IBIT has kind of changed the game, potentially forever, certainly until the next big game-changing ETF or something else comes along that really just opens the floodgates to the masses. They start trading not just IBIT underlying, which they traded in size, but also IBIT options. That was really a game changer for the crypto derivatives landscape. Now, it didn't happen in 2025, so we can't take full credit for it this year. IBIT options were actually approved in September of last year, and they started trading on November 19th of last year. So technically, this story began in 2024, but it really took off in earnest this year. Just absolute ridiculous volume. I don't think anyone thought out of the gate that IBIT would be rivaling or blowing away VIX not too long after from a volume perspective, but that's pretty much what we saw out there on the year. In fact, the ADV was pretty close to 1 million contracts a day just a week or two ago. We kind of come off it now. Obviously, it is December, the tail end of the year. As we kicked off the show, IBIT at our 49.60 listeners puts it down about 40 cents from last week. The ADV coming back to earth as well, 730,000 contracts a day now, down nearly 150,000 contracts from this time last week. But then again, it is the end of December, so we kind of expect this type of stuff. About 350,000 contracts on the tape so far today, so probably not going to hit even that reduced ADV today as well. And that 30-day vol at about a 40, down about 4 points. But if you want to look back historically on the year, it has been a wild year. If you're wondering what was the hottest options day for IBIT this year, listeners, it was nearly 2.2 million contracts, 2.18 million contracts to be precise. That came on November 21st of this year, so an absolute banger. The quietest day was actually back in March, 164,000 contracts on March 25th. So you might have maybe chosen, a midsummer day or something like that, but actually March, heading into all the tariff madness. Vol-wise, we've had quite a range in IBIT this year. I say we're hanging out at about a 40 right now. That puts us towards the lower part of the 52-week range. The actual low came on August 6th of 32.6%. The high March 10th, 62.3%. So interestingly enough, the high for the year from a vol perspective came not that far away from the overall options volume low for the year, which is kind of wild as well. If you want to look at skew swung wildly this year. The lowest was -7, a little over -7, about 7.2%. That was on May 13th, so not actually on April 8th, which is kind of wild. This is 30-day skew, listeners. And then to the upside, a positive nearly 16%. That was back on August 20th. So wild stuff out here. Greg, I think we can probably do the whole show on IBIT alone. Anything else stand out to you in terms of looking back on the year from either IBIT or from a overall Bitcoin perspective before we start crunching some of the numbers for this final trading week, sir?
Yeah, I think one more story behind Bitcoin is really strategy and the digital asset treasuries. So back in February of this year, strategy was doing really well. We had a lot of upside vol explosion back in, let's see, let me just pull this chart up real quick. So if I'm looking at earlier this year, we really see strategy hitting, $450 this summer, and then something like going into the year around, call it the 420 handle. So obviously that was a big momentum push for Bitcoin and Bitcoin acquisition. And today we're seeing strategy kind of at annual lows. And I think the big question here is if Bitcoin heads lower around the acquisition price for MicroStrategy and some of these other digital asset treasuries, do we get the downward spiral? So I think that's kind of a big question. That momentum shifted from very positive to maybe negative as we speak. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, you're right. Our good buddy, the Monster, aka Strategy these days, not looking quite as monstrous as it did at the beginning of the year. Started the year right around $300, is hanging out pretty close to his 52-week low right now, 156.5. That puts it down nearly 50%, obviously, on the year. As Greg mentioned, we did get as high as about 457. That was back in the July-August timeframe. So nearly 3x the level that is trading at right now. So a lot of concerns being felt on that digital asset treasury front. Let's see how those concerns are shaping up for the final trading week of the year, shall we, listeners? Coming into the end of the year, we've been talking for a while about how Bitcoin vol hasn't exactly been ripping your face off, and that continues into the typically seasonally quiet vol period in the late December. We had the weekly vol 40 and a quarter on the show last week, 37 and a quarter this week, so coming in 3 points on the weekly vol. 30-day vol coming in as well, 42 and a quarter last week, 39 and 3/4. This week's are coming in about 2.5 points on the 30-day vol front. And hanging out where the holders like to play, 6 months and beyond, we had a 46.5 on the vol there, 44.8. Greg, this is the time of year when vol typically goes to die across the board in all kinds of assets, including Bitcoin. Anything catching your eye on the vol front as we wind down the year, sir?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we had been seeing as a theme over the past month or so was the contango shape or the term structure shape. We're back into a pretty decently steep contango. So if we look at sort of the end of year expiration, call it, well, I don't want to say the next 3 days, but let's say the next, week or so, we're like at around 40. And if we go out to March and June, kind of 42, 44. We've been flat for quite a while, so it's nice to see a little bit of a contango one more time. I do think the skew has this right, though. I think if Bitcoin rallies from here, we see lower vol, but I think the risk is actually to the downside for sort of explosive vol. And so long-term skew, short-term skew, all pricing that in. I think that is right, and there is that downward spiral potential catalyst that we could see with some of these digital asset treasuries.
Well, let's look at how that skew is shaping up, listeners. Last week on the show, the weekly skew -3.5, coming in a little bit this week, -2.2. This week, 30-day skew -4.1 last week, -3.5 this week, and the 6-month skew -3.75 last week, -3.25 this week. Kind of what Greg was talking about there. Still bearish, coming in slightly, but again, that's also kind of your end of the year vol just going to die out there, listeners. Greg, I know you were pretty interested in all things MSTU out there. Are you still slinging that bad boy to wind down the year here, sir, or have you washed your hands of it for now?
For now, washed my hands of it. But I definitely think there's going to be opportunity in that strategy trade. We'll see how 2026 plays out for it. I think this is a big theme for 2026 for Bitcoin. How strategy performs. Do they become forced sellers? How do some of these other digital asset treasuries perform? And if we get any sort of downside volatility, obviously MSTU will have a big dip on that, and we'll have a lot of trouble recovering from that 2x tracking error. So that trade is probably going to pay off again. You might just see another MSTU down 90% on the year.
Yeah, down about 90% so far year to date, listeners. $72.50, trading a little bit shy of $9 right now. This chart, if you've listened to Vol Views, this chart is reminiscent of a lot of those Vol ETPs that we talk about on that show, listeners, which normally just go to die. And that's pretty much what MSTU has done so far this year. But it's time for us to keep on going right on into the altcoin universe, listeners.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we break down what's catching our eye and everything else in the crypto landscape, pretty much, with the exception of right now, where we do our final top 10 breakdown for 2025, listeners. Coming into the end of the year, it cost you about $12.75 billion to break into the top 10. That is down from about $13.3 billion last week. Once again, that gets you to Cardano. In fact, most of our setup is looking pretty much the same as last week in terms of order. Again, Cardano number 10, $12.75 billion. Number 9, it's Doge, $20.7 billion. Number 8, it's Tron, $26.8 billion. Number 7, it's Solana, $69.25 billion, down from about $70.3 billion last week. Number 6, USD coin, 76 billion exactly. Number 5, XRP, 112.3 billion. Number 4, it's BNB, 117.3. Number 3, it's Tether, 186.6. Number 2, it is Ethereum, 354 exactly. And the big dog this week, looking a little bit lighter, it is Bitcoin, 1.74 trillion worth of market cap. But Greg, we talked about everything Bitcoin earlier, and clearly IBIT is a big story there, as well as what the future holds for all things strategy. But if you ask me, gun to my head, you ask me right now, what was the most interesting, the wildest major crypto asset that you watched last year? It definitely has to be ETH. ETH lived many lives over the course of this past year. It came into the year and we were kind of wondering, Greg, can ETH do it? ETH kind of underperformed Bitcoin and Solana in 2024, and a lot of ETH holders were hoping, okay, this is the year. This is the year ETH steals a march on Bitcoin and on Solana. It says, I'm back, baby. And what happened the first quarter of the year was a disaster. It sold off hard. On our future show, where we track a wide variety of assets, ETH was by far the biggest losing asset coming out of Q1 into the start of Q2. And then something magical happened. It kind of got on that roller coaster to the upside, and it had this just rocket to the upside. And all of a sudden, ETH went from the bottom of our losers list to the top of our gainers list by the middle of the year. By midsummer, getting into Q3, ETH was all the rage. We were talking about things like ETHzilla here on the show. All of a sudden, people were like, the hell with Bitcoin treasuries. It's all about the ETH treasuries. ETH was as hot as we've ever seen it. Certainly, new all-time highs coincided with that August of this year, August 24th, nearly 5,000, 49.52. If you're wondering, listeners, ETH coming into the start of the show right now, 29.34. So a wee bit below that all-time high of 49, pretty much exactly 2,000 handles below that all-time high. And then, of course, we saw ETH live yet another life here at the end of the year, where it came right back down. I'll have to go crunch the numbers. We'll find out on the Futures Rundown, listeners, exactly where ETH placed for the year. But it was back in our list of the biggest losers again by the end of the year. So if you were an ETH bull or just an ETH fan or an ETH watcher this year, Greg, I think you're exhausted at the end of the year. Can you agree, sir?
Yeah, quite the movements, and surprisingly, pretty steady vol all year. If you look at the 30-day D-vol index from Deribit, it's really between 60 and 75, and just kind of trended between those and oscillated between those really consistently, despite, like you said, a pretty big range, peak to trough, 300%, 1,500 to nearly 5,000. That's quite the range for the asset in 1 year. But vol kind of held consistent at 75. Just for context, if we look at the VXSLV, which is a silver 30-day vol, right now it's around 65. So ETH vol and silver vol are about the same right now. But I think ETH is going to be more range bound, at least to the top side for now. So that's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, I think when you and I were talking back in April and May, Greg, nobody cared about ETH. ETH was, you're right, it was below 2,000. I remember trying to get you interested in ETH. You're like, I don't care about ETH. ETH is dead. ETH is dead to me. A lot of people felt that way. You're right. When it was threatening, 1,700, 1,500 down in those levels, it seemed like maybe the fork was stuck in ETH. It was done. It was over. The good times. I remember thinking back to when our buddy Dr. Vix kind of infamously a few years ago just washed his hands of all things crypto, including ETH, and he bailed on all of it around 2,500. I remember thinking 2,500, not a bad level. I wish we can get back to that. That's how bad things were looking in ETH at the time. So yeah, just an absolutely wild run out here for the year. Listen, a couple other data points. As Greg mentioned, we kind of broke through that 2,000 level in that mid-April, getting into late April, into May timeframe out there, before ETH really turned around. Kicked off the year 33.32. So that puts it down year to date right now, almost exactly 400 handles, about exactly 12% right now, a year to date. But as Greg pointed out, that kind of belies the wild year that we had, the wild range, sub 2,000 all the way up to nearly 5K out there on the year. So absolutely wild stuff. If you have an ETH story you want to share with us, by all means, listeners, send it in. Did you wash your hands of ETH this year? Was the roller coaster too much for you? Did you bail back in April and May? I'm done. I can't take the pain anymore. And then watch it go up. Did you buy in when everyone was talking ETH Treasuries in that summertime period? Tell us your ETH story. I'm sure there are quite a few interesting ones out there. How is ETH shaping up to end the year? Like we said, it's back below the 3K level, 29.31, down about exactly 400 handles now on the year. The vol, as you'd expect this time of year, coming back to earth a bit. 61 on the weekly vol last week, 53.2 this week. On the 30-day vol, 64 and a quarter last week, 59 and a quarter this week. So down exactly 5 points there. And out where the hodlers hang out, 65 and a half, 64.3 this week. Listen, let's go out to the skew as well, because the skew in ETH has been all over the place this year, as you might guess. Last week on the weekly skew was -4, almost -4.5, about -4.4. Coming in this week, -2 and a quarter. 30-day skew, -4.2. Last week, -3 and a quarter. This week, so coming in nearly a full point on the monthly front. And going out to where the hodlers hang out, 180-day skew, -1.2 last week, -1 this week. Greg, that's probably another story we could kind of highlight here for 2025. This was the year that crypto skew pretty much turned negative across the board, at least for all the major assets. I mean, for the longest time, we've been doing this show for a while, and you could always hold on to that in your back pocket. You always had that little bit of upside premium because the hodlers were always going to come in and they were going to bid up a call somewhere. And you always had that nice premium for a covered call or something else. You could buy verticals for more attractive levels. It was just a kind of a unwritten rule in the crypto space that the skew is always going to be positive. It's always going to be bid. And that ended this year, Greg. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that really comes back to the theme of a new type of investor base. I think also back in the day, it's kind of hard to say how high can crypto go. We've seen Bitcoin go from being able to mine it for free on your laptop to breaking $1,000 back in 2013, going from 1,000 to 10,000, so on and so forth. And so the upside optionality became really interesting on these up moves, and you get these FOMO rallies. But now that Bitcoin and crypto in general and Ethereum are more widely owned assets, the game has shifted away from fear of missing out towards creating yield on top of my asset in my portfolio. And I think that's really the source of the change in the volatility surface there.
Yeah, the hodlers have been maybe displaced by the unwashed masses, Greg, the grandmas from Iowa, to call them what you will. The folks come in and they look at it like another traditional equity or index holding. They want to just get some yield, right? And they want to protect that downside. And we're going to start maybe seeing crypto skews line up more with traditional equity skews. We'll see going forward, listeners, as a lot of these new players dive into this space. Are you one of these new players? Did you discover the world of crypto through the explosion of ETFs? Greg, we haven't even touched on, ETH. Part of the wild story that was ETH this year was, of course, the introduction of ETH ETFs and the debate about can they and should they offer staking rewards. And now that we're seeing ETFs on that front as well, that does kind of change the game for a lot of folks out there who maybe didn't want to keep their stuff on exchange for whatever reason, didn't want to go through the hassle and expense of staking. Now you can get ETFs that pretty much offer that as well, Greg. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's going to shift the dynamic towards owning some of these staking assets as opposed to the proof of work assets like Bitcoin. So that's been my thesis. We'll see how that plays out. I do think these digital asset treasuries kind of front run a lot of the buying, and now some of them are underwater. So that demand's probably going to be met with supply, but we'll see how this shakes out. But I think in the long term, anything that has a yield to it is just going to be more interesting to own.
Folks love their yield, Greg. It is inescapable at the end of the day. You know what else has been inescapable this year? Certainly if you're listening to this show, because Greg won't stop talking about it. No, it's not his MSTU. Surprising, not just MSTU. He likes other things besides MSTU. He likes MSTU the best, listeners, but he likes other things as well, including his beloved Circle. This is another one that kind of rocked not just the equity world, but the crypto world out here this year as well. Of course, with the much maligned IPO. We saw this thing go public. I think they wanted 30s and then up to 100 that first trading day. And then within a few sessions, it was up to pretty much its high, at least so far for all time, of nearly $300. $298.99 to be precise. A lot of people complaining that they mispriced that IPO terribly, which if you look at the early days of trading, the answer for that was yes. Of course, since then, it's been mostly red on the screen. Year to date now, which again, I put year in quotes because we only started talking about this back in June or so of last year. So over the last 6 months, we saw a lot of upside. It has come back to earth quite a bit. As we're kicking off the show, Circle hanging out a little bit north of the 80 handle. That puts it pretty much close to unched on the year, off maybe $2.50, however you want to mark that IPO launch level. If you're talking about the roughly 80 odd handle, then we're pretty much off a couple of bucks from that. Even though we have gotten lower, the 52-week low is actually $64. So glass half full, we have bounced off that. But Greg, this is a wild one. I kind of got lured to the dark side of trading this not that long after it went public. In fact, I think folks listened to us here on this show. I think it was myself and our buddy, Mr. Bill, who likes to harvest a little bit of the old risk premium as well. And he and I were looking live on the show at some of the put premiums in the weekly options when Circle was around, I think, $200. I remember selling the 195 puts at the time. And the put skew was off the charts. Obviously, in hindsight, it was well priced, but for the weekly options, this was all very near-dated stuff. They were just paying a ridiculous amount for just about any downside put they could get. So it made for some interesting trading in those days. If you're wondering, listeners, volume-wise, Circle has been a pretty big story as well out there. The high that it ever hit was nearly 800,000 contracts, 779,000 contracts. That was back shortly after it listed on June 20th. The low came just about 40,000 contracts on September 30th. So interesting timing out there. Vol-wise, the vol has been all over the place in Circle as well. 178 was the high, again, back on that June 20th time frame, which was when things were flying fast and furious. Stock had just gone public. So take that number with a bit of a grain of salt, listeners. And of course, the nadir for vol, at least for now, came last week, right around 64. So that seasonally quiet period also affecting Circle. Greg, you're one of the bigger Circle proponents that I know out there. I believe you called it the Netflix of the forthcoming stablecoin era. So you've been trading pretty actively. You talked about your March risk reversal, I believe, out there is kind of the way you've been playing it. What are your thoughts on Circle coming onto the scene, roaring out of the gate earlier this year, and then some of the developments we've seen since, sir?
Yeah, we've seen obviously a huge distribution of Circle since the highs. I think really what's been attractive to me in Circle is the overall level of implied volatility. Hanging out around is kind of the 70-ish level, but we've seen such a huge range in vol and a huge range in prices. I really think things just settle down, kind of trade sideways, and we probably still might see some downside, but over the long run, I think this is something that's going to be really interesting. And I don't think that 300 price level is out of the picture in the future. But for now, I think there's an interesting vol play to be done, like you said, around selling puts in terms of acquiring some shares at a pretty discounted price. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And I just want to be short the put, short the Vega in this type of environment for Circle.
Yeah, it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how strategy fares, perhaps, if they start sucking down the broad crypto market. We might see that in Circle, and maybe Circle can shake it off, listeners, and keep climbing back to somewhere near that nearly 300 high that it hit not too long ago. Solana, another weird one, Greg. It started off the year, it seemed like it had cemented its place as the clear number 2 to Bitcoin. Everybody was talking Solana. Nobody cared about ETH. ETH was in the toilet. It seemed inevitable that Solana would take over that number 2 spot from ETH. And the year kind of reflected that. We came in hot. It was a year where Solana and Bitcoin 2024 both outperformed ETH dramatically. And so it seemed like Solana could do no wrong at that point. Listen, it was just inevitable that it would slot into that number 2 spot. And it was reflected. Weirdly enough, we saw crazy price trajectories for ETH this year. Saw a pretty interesting trajectory, but pretty stable. You know, we kind of came in and we rallied, sold off earlier, then we rallied later in the year for Bitcoin before settling in where we are right now. Solana came into the year hot. It roared out of the gate. It actually hit its high for the year, not in August or October. It kind of threatened those levels, but it actually hit it, listeners, back in January of this year. That's how hot Solana was out of the gate. Nearly $300, right around the 293 level. So again, January 19th, kind of the apex for the year for Solana. And then things kind of fell apart. We obviously saw the April meltdown a few months later. And by that point, Solana had already had the legs cut out from under it. Got down sub 100, 96.5. I know we were talking here on this network about, adding some more. And a lot of our pro members talking about nibbling at prices when it broke 150, then back down to 125. And then when it broke 100, certainly it was very attractive for a lot of people. As we roll on into the end of the year here, listeners, Solana still threatening that 125 level, actually 123.14 when we kicked off the show, down nearly 2 points, about 125 where it was this time last week. If you want to look year to date, that now puts it off about exactly 35% year to date. Again, came in hot, and when you can't maintain that throughout the year, it certainly makes your chart look pretty rough. It did have another flirtation with not quite the 300 level, but the 250 level or so back in that September, October timeframe. And then since then, it's kind of been cut in half yet again. So Solana, interesting. I'm curious, Greg, when we kicked off the year, you were pretty hot. A lot of people were pretty hot on Solana. A lot of people thought, again, it was just a matter of time until it was announced as the heir apparent. Maybe those conversations have shifted. What are your thoughts at the end of the year on the wild year for Solana, sir?
Yeah, it's kind of just following the broader market. I look at Solana, I look at Ethereum, pretty similar charts in terms of bottoms and tops and where we're at today. What I think is interesting about Solana is that historically it's a more volatile asset than Ethereum, and today the vol surface is priced in a very similar fashion. And now we also have Solana spot ETFs. Bitwise just launched one. We have the CME Solana futures. We have the futures-based ETFs. Those have options on them. And so there's a great way to play sort of the relative vol between Solana and ETH here. Obviously, the high in Solana came in around the Trump meme coin launch. And so I think Solana got a lot of attention as sort of a meme base layer chain. And I don't think this story is necessarily over. And I think we could see Solana become a competitor to ETH again sometime in the future. So I do think there's an interesting trade between those two assets.
So at least for your views on Solana maybe have cooled a little bit on rocketing to the number 2 spot on the chart, sir?
Well, I think maybe. I think there's just a hedged way to play it. Like you could short ETH, go long Solana. That's one way to do it. Or you could do some sort of relative vol between the two assets. I think that's another way to play it. There's just interesting opportunity when we look at Solana benchmarked against ETH. And then you can sort of trade away the entire crypto risk and play more of the, pairs trade. I think that's more interesting right now for a Solana trade.
A lot of interesting things. What are your thoughts on Solana? Have you given up on Solana kind of becoming the heir apparent in the crypto space? Are you doubling down? Do you like more here? Are you nibbling or reallocating at these levels? What are your thoughts on all things Solana? As we keep rolling, let's run through a few others here in the altcoin universe for this week. XRP did a lot of living this year as well. If you listen to our buddy Mr. Bill on the show, his wife, a big fan of XRP, him not so much. So a divided household when it comes to XRP. XRP, again, giving up some of the ghosts this week as well. 191 on the show last week, 186 this week's coming off about a nickel. But of course, if you were listening this year, this year was the year that it seemed like XRP was roaring back to life after being locked at 50 odd cents pretty much since we started the show. Did nothing. It finally came back to life this year, got as high as 365. That was actually back in July of this year. So these assets having some interesting lifespans over the course of this year. As we're coming into the end of the year, like we said, back to about $1.85. That puts it off about 11% on the year. It was right around the $2 level to kick off the year in January. So interesting stuff out there. And let's go out to Doge really quickly as well. 13.2 cents last week, 12.3 cents this week. So down almost a full cent. In terms of the high for Doge, again, another one that peaked very early in the year, nearly 35 cents. That was in kind of early to mid-January as well. So Doge, kind of like Solana, doing a lot of its living early in the year, then having some fluctuations during, of course, the April meltdown, struggling back late summer like a lot of other crypto assets did, and now coming back to earth a little bit again. Litecoin, 77.5 last week, 77.85 this week. So actually one of the few crypto assets that's up, if ever so slightly on the week, about 38 cents on the week. Hit its high for the year. Another one that kind of peaked in January 31st this time, nearly 130, 129.93 out there in Litecoin. Let's run through a few others and we'll get Greg's thoughts on the altcoin universe, anything else that tickled his fancy this year. Cardano, 35.6 cents this week, 37.1 cents, so down almost 1.5 cents on the week. This is another one mid-January, kind of an interesting time for a lot of crypto assets this year, especially in the altcoin universe. Cardano also hitting its high there, a little over $1, 105 in mid-January. Polkadot, 185 this week, 178 last week. It's another one that's gaining, if ever so slightly on the week. This one hit its high for the year again, January. 1067 was the high for Polkadot. So this one has come off substantially from that nearly $11 level back in January. And everyone's beloved Shiba Inu. Last week, 1,000,725. This week, 1,000,728. So actually gaining slightly on the week as well. And this is another one that saw its best days back in January. Yet another reason why I've been saying for a while here on this show, you know, January comes in like a lion for a lot of different things, and equity vol sometimes can explode. Markets, of course, meme stocks kicked off back in 2021 in January. Of course, we all know what else happened in January of 2021. So a lot of things have popped off to give us a little bit of vol, a little bit of action in January. And the crypto market following suit there as well, with a lot of assets hitting their high for the year in January. So you sleep on January at your peril, listeners, including in Shiba Inu. Hit its high for the year of 1,000,219. Who can think back to such heady levels in Shiba? By the way, our chat mentioning, was Mr. Unlimited in our chat saying he offered 1 million Shiba Inu to the winner of our first inaugural Options Insider Fantasy Football League this year. Looks like that might be Mr. Kevin Green, so get ready to pony up your 1 million Shiba. See, Greg, if you had played fantasy football this year, you could be the proud owner of 1 million Shiba Inu. What do you think of that, sir? I think it's like 3 cents.
I think I would have lost. So either way, I don't think I would have got it.
Well, then you would have to give 100 million Shiba Inu to the other players. That's how it would work. Obviously, been a wild year in the altcoin universe. A lot of the assets, interestingly enough, peaking in January, then kind of never getting to those levels again. What resonates to you, sir, as you look back on the altcoin universe in 2025?
Yeah, well, I think, it's really coming back around sort of the regulatory shift around the election for crypto. That really gave crypto a lot of momentum. And then the inauguration was sort of the peak for a lot of these coins. Dogecoin is a great example. We had sort of the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, and all that stuff. There's a meme behind the meme, so to speak. And I think the idea that maybe X would start listing Doge as the crypto Twitter money was a pretty good speculative possibility. I think that possibility is sort of behind us now. So things that gave fundamental reason to the rally didn't materialize. So I expect a lot of these altcoins to kind of just continue to grind lower. I don't think there's a catalyst on the horizon, at least not one that I see right now.
Outside of these major ones, any other altcoins that came on your radar this year you maybe want to mention or share with the folks, sir?
The big one right now that people are looking at is Hyperliquid. It's been a very successful decentralized exchange. Hype is the ticker. We just got some options trading on it for on Derive. You can trade some Hype options. So for those who are in the DeFi space and want to trade some of this altcoin volatility, they can do that. But that's really kind of been the big one that people have been looking at. When we had that sell-off on October 10th, massive liquidations, Hyperliquid was actually one of the biggest venues in terms of liquidations. I think it was on par with Binance. So that just gives you a good idea of sort of the adoption that this decentralized exchange has been getting.
Who doesn't want to trade some Hype, Greg? That sounds fun. I like that. Hype, if you're wondering, listeners, trading right around 25 3/4 right now, off about 4.3% on the year. So we're pretty close to where we were this time a year ago. It did get as low as looks like about 10 1/4 back on that big April meltdown. And then the big rally in September got up to, looks like nearly $60, about 58.5 before kind of coming back to earth here right around the 25 level. So if you like Hype, you're pretty much right back where you were to start the year. So maybe you like that level. But you know what, Greg? We can't do our year-end show without a little bit of fun. So let's get out of here on some crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, Greg, you missed us on the show last week, so you missed your chance to weigh in on what was undoubtedly the most contentious question of the week we have ever asked, Mr. Greg. Are you ready? Are you ready, sir, to hear what the hot topic was that just wrapped up earlier today? We have the results. We asked our listeners, Greg. Very simple. It was a shortened holiday week last week. Thought we'd have a little fun. We'd say, what is your favorite Christmas movie? And we gave them our canonical 3, which are Christmas Story, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and It's a Wonderful Life. But we also said write-ins are welcome. And boy, did they, Greg. We got a lot of write-ins for a lot of films I never thought of in the Christmas vein. But that made it fun, made it surprising out there. So the winner was It's a Wonderful Life, 40%. Then we had number 2, Elf. Oh, I forgot to mention Elf. Elf was also part of it. Elf was 24%. And then Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was 20%. And Christmas Story, bringing up the rear, probably my favorite of that bunch, 16%. So actually it was a canonical 4. I lied. So wild results, but It's a Wonderful Life, kind of the cliche choice, taking it. But Greg, I'm curious, we had a lot of write-ins. Is your favorite somewhere on that list, or do you have a write-in you want to share with us, sir?
So I think my favorite on that list is A Christmas Story. In terms of write-ins, I'm sure people have written in Die Hard because that is the meme for Christmas movies.
Yeah, we got a lot of love for Die Hard. That one, my son even mentioned that to me. He said, "Dad, you forgot Die Hard." It's like, well, it's a Christmas movie, but it's not. It takes place at Christmas. I don't know if Christmas is thematic to the story. There was a lot of love for Die Hard out there. And yeah, I'm with you. I would go Christmas Story all day. Shoot your eye out, kid. That movie is... I was just this summer cruising through Cleveland. We had to swing by the Christmas Story house just to see it. They have the lamp in the window. It was fun. We took a few photos in front of the lamp. But surprise write-ins, Greg. Caddyshack. I don't think of that as a Christmas. Does it take place at Christmas? I haven't seen it in a while. Maybe it does. But that one kind of surprised me. Then we have write-ins for this one coming. Holiday Inn, starring Bing Crosby, 1942. Not one I'm familiar with, but that's why we do the poll, listeners. The Grinch. Now I would take the Grinch animated version. That's a great one. I would accept that. But we had write-ins for the Jim Carrey Grinch, Greg, which I think that costume I think is the stuff of nightmares to me. But hey, I guess if you're down for it, listeners, a bunch more write-ins for Die Hard. Oh, Bad Santa. Just an absolutely ridiculous movie, but a Christmas movie. Oh, and then Christmas Vacation, which someone mentioned is a Chicago movie, which I had forgotten. I haven't seen that movie in forever, so we finally watched that one this year. That was our holiday movie this year, and it was fun to catch up on the Christmas. Yeah, a lot of more. Home Alone. People wrote in Home Alone as well, which is another Christmas one that you don't think of. So there we go, Greg. The most contentious question of the week we have ever asked. Who thought people would get so hot over their favorite Christmas movie. Well, Greg, that music means we have come to the end of a wild year, not just in Christmas movies, but in the crypto rundown. But before we dive on into the wild year that I'm sure will be 2026, Greg, if folks want to kick the tires and light the fires on some Amberdata goodness, they got a cup of eggnog in their hand, maybe they're counting down the new year, they want to fire up a sweet GUI, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, please visit pro.amberdata.io. And if you want to get our weekly newsletter, you can go to amberdataderivative.substack.com.
There you go, amberdataderivative.substack.com. Any cool things, any cool hints, any cool teases of what you got up the sleeve that folks can look forward to in 2026, sir?
Yeah, so we're doing a new version of the GUI. We call it our market intelligence platform, and this expands the data sets beyond just derivatives, includes spot prices, includes on-chain data, and it's AI enabled, so you can kind of prompt it to create charts across the data sets for you. So that'll be really great. We're launching that early in 2026.
Wow, cool stuff. So pretty soon too, early 2026. So stay tuned for that. Yep. If you haven't messed around with the GUI yet, what are you waiting for, listeners? You can't beat the price, and you certainly can't beat the data. Amberdata, AMBERDATA. The place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Oh, we have write-ins in our chat. I mentioned Jingle All the Way was also a write-in, a popular write-in as well. So Arnold Schwarzenegger. So a lot of good stuff over there, listeners. See, if you're following us at Options on Twitter, you can play along on all these fun questions of the week, listeners. That is going to do it for us on the Crypto Rundown for this year. I want to thank all of you who joined us on the show. We'll be back again to wrap up your trading day on the Hot Options Report. Then we're back again next week to kick off a brand new trading year in crypto. What will be the hot thing? Let's all find out together. We'll see you back here next week, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play.